guys, so keeping up with our prime time for perch, pardon the pun, but it does work, so we're sticking with it. Moving on to actual rigging styles. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a little series of small videos just showing the more common kind of setups for fishing creature baits. I mean, this will work for paddle tails and various other baits as well, but keep it simple. We'll go with the creatures. So each one we're just going to do a little individual section on each as we go through. So starting off at the top, here we have, I mean, you're all going to recognize this anyway. So this is your standard drop shot. Down here on the left or the right for you guys. So this is your Jika setup, weedless on the creature bait. We have the old faithful Chibruska. And we have essentially, going on that one. So that's your Texas setup with a couple of glass rattles on there. And then we got one of the sliding bean sinkers. Very, very similar Texas setup, but with a slight twist. So what we'll do, we'll go through all of these individually, have a look, see what they're good at, and why you would pick or choose each one relevant to the situation you're fishing. Okay, so most of you guys will already recognise this, and apologies for teaching to suck eggs, but a lot of people still come in the shop and ask us about this rig. So this is the drop shot rig. So as you can see, we actually tie the drop shot style hook, which has a slightly outturned eye. We tie that directly onto the leader or the main line, if you like, and that will then stand proud when you're fishing, which will then create kind of a stiff section for your bait to kind of be suspended off of. Drop shot weights are what we use on this one, so that is your standard drop shot weight. So I'm kind of working blind on this camera right now, so I'm trying to find where the center is, but the whole idea of a drop shot weight is that would be fished hard on the bottom, and then essentially the bait would be moved up and down with the smallest amount of movement. So this is a winter method. It is designed for kind of quite stationary fish that are hauled up in an area, and you want to maximize the amount of time that you're presenting that bait in that area in front of the fish, trying to get a bit of life out of them and get them to hit it. Main parts of this rig, obviously the drop shot knot, which we will show you in a minute how to tie that. There are a few different ways of presenting your bait off of this hook. I know there's many people will argue certain ways are better than others. Honestly, just find out what works for yourself and go from there. This can be used creature baits, paddle tails, basically any kind of bait that's going to offer a small amount of movement when kind of jiggled in a set area. And then your drop shot lead, which we came on earlier. The nice thing about these, just pinch them straight off. You can slide that out, leaving yourself a decent tag end. You can then reset that and you're adjusting your depth. So if you find that the fish are kind of 6 to 8 inches off the bottom, you can present that right in front of them. If you find that they are kind of hard on the bottom, obviously just pop that, slide that lead down closer to the hook, pull it tight, and again, you're right in there. The other nice thing about these leads, because you are fishing lead on the bottom, if this snags, worst case scenario, you're going to come back and the lead's going to be off. So this is mostly used for fishing vertically. So straight down the edges, so canals, lakes, anything like that, or rivers, if you've got an inside slack and you can fish this straight down onto the bottom, this is kind of the rig to really get in there nice and stealthy and tempt a couple of fish that might not be as active as they would have been earlier on in kind of the warmer months. So let's show you how to tie this hook. So here we have one of HTO's all-round drop shots. So this is in a size 2, which is spot on for the slightly larger baits. Obviously you can go a lot smaller if you want, but we're going with a size 2 because it's easier to show you how to tie it. So if we imagined that this here would be coming from your rod, this is the end of your line, you want to actually thread the hook upside down so that the point would be facing to the bottom of the line, like so. And once you kind of get to, it doesn't matter where you're at because evidently you're going to adjust the depth anyway. So just quite literally bring the line back round itself to create a loop. Now when you create this loop, you can then push off this little section here and create, it's like a snowman. And then if you pass the snowman's head through the body 3 times, so that's 2, and that's 3. And then what you want to do, if you can see this properly, is you want to bring this hook back up and through the hole that you've made with the snowman's head. So up and then just pass that back through that gap. Now the main trick here is to try and keep that knot, see where it's spinning up actually on the shank. That's what you want. So you want to tease this down ever so gently. And normally you'd obviously moisten this with a bit of saliva. I'm not going to do that on camera because that's disgusting. But you slowly tweak it up, and as you come taut, what you'll notice there is that the hook's actually, the knot has formed either side of the shank of the hook, which is going to give you that standoff that you need for the drop shot. All right, we'll move on to our next rig. So this one is a weedless Texas setup. Now I see this used not quite as designed for. There are better rigs for what other people have been, well, I've seen been happening with this, but the Texas rig is a rig for working almost vertically. I mean, yes, you can cast and yes, you can work it, but there are better rigs out there for kind of scanning and covering areas like the Carolina rig, where you're going to suspend your weight further up. This is more for kind of fishing under your feet or short range. Now the whole idea is, so we've got a sliding Texas weight that's just free running up there. Some people will pop a stop a little bit further up if you don't want it coming too far up. Obviously you can see I've got two little glass beads there. I'll explain those to you in a second. So the idea of the Texas rig is that as you come up through the water and then release, naturally the Texas bullet is going to go down first, and then your bait is going to flutter down behind it. So that's the whole idea, is giving you a slower drop as that comes down. Really good for working through cover. Anything that could be a bit snaggy is less snaggy as a rig, if you like. And as we said, the glass beads that I said about earlier, these are purely attract. So I don't know if I'm going to get it to happen enough that you're going to hear it on here, but the glass beads make a lovely rattle. And obviously if you're working this up and down through structure or where you're fishing, those little clicks are just going to give you a little bit more kind of attraction to the rig itself. So as I said, if you're covering kind of areas and you want to scan around, you'd want to use the Carolina. Now whilst I've got this here, it would make sense to show you. So you would bring your Texas weight further up, you would fix, get those out of the way, you would fix a swivel or something at a set distance away, and then you would have your weight slightly further up. So what that would give you, just let you kind of cover the ground easier, keeps your bait kind of freer swimming when you're dragging it through. So that's a nice quick one. That is the Texas rig. So this one is more kind of a variation on your Texas rig, but for all intents and purposes, it is the same thing. The only difference we got here is rather than using a cone style sinker or a weight, we're actually using a bead. So these are the Jungle Gym bean sinkers. So essentially exactly the same idea as a Texas. It's going to slide off up and down. The only other kind of difference to this really is these seem less likely to snag. Obviously you can go up quite a bit more in weight and you're always going to get a little bit of a standoff, whereas obviously the Texas is just going to kind of leave you flat on the bottom. This one will kind of give you just that little bit more, and especially if you're using a floating bait, it's just going to give you a little more of a standoff. But again, exactly the same principle, slow drop, straight back through, back onto your weight, and off you go. So this is one we don't actually see get used very often in the UK. Well, certainly not on the south coast or anywhere near where we kind of fish. But for all intents and purposes, I mean, that is essentially a G-car. So you've got a fixed, what would be a drop shot lead fixed onto a small swivel, which is then already fixed onto the weedless hook. So trying to explain this in layman's terms and keeping it simple, but this is a rig that essentially you want to fish hard on the bottom. You don't want to be bringing this up, you don't want to be doing anything else. You want to be feeling that bottom as you're coming through. These do work really well with the buoyant bait. Just feeding them up and through, bouncing around, and off you kind of go. So they don't tend to snag. They are pretty darn good, to be fair. I mean, if you treated it like a kind of a Texas style, but without the sliding up and down, but then kind of like a jig head, but you won't have all this articulation and movement that you would do normally on a jig head. I'm pretty sure when you work in these, you just get such a better, more natural kind of presentation as that's tracking underneath. You've got full kind of articulation and movement here. It just makes the whole kind of setup a lot more appealing to the fish as you're dragging it past. And then there's the Chubruska. So this does get used quite a lot around, and I think it's more to do with kind of the versatility and the fact that you can chop, change, switch out and everything else so easily with this method that makes it so popular around here. So essentially the Chebrusca is the style of weight that's in here. So this is a Chebrusca weight, kind of looks like a little kettlebell, which looks like a little teapot basically. So the thick end, the dumpy end, goes onto your hook, and then what you do is you actually pass that through the lead, which then comes out the other side, and then you would attach via a clip or tie. I'd advise using a clip on these. If you do happen to kind of, this just starts to work loose, having a clip there to secure it really does help. But the nice part about the Chebrusca is that, say you're kind of fishing somewhere with a bit of flow, so you've got your 5 grams, that's what you need to hold bottom. Say if you moved over to a slack, you can see fish sat there, you don't want to be spanking a 5 gram plop out there. You want to make it a little bit more tactile. All you would have to do is you just slide the cheb off of the point. As you can see, it would come off if I didn't have the knot there, and then you would actually just slide a smaller one on. Same goes for the hooks as well. So say if you wanted to switch your baits over, you could literally just pull that out, pop the hook off, put the hook, well, bigger hook, smaller hook, back onto the pin, slide that back into there, and again you're off and fishing with kind of the minimal playing about, not having to retie anything if you use a clip and not tie it like I did. It just makes things super quick, nice kind of switch it out, plug and play, covers all kind of areas. Okay, so that's kind of a roundup on the 5 most used perchy kind of style rigs. Obviously these do work for pike, they do work for chub. You know, if there's a fish and feeding is going to hit it, we know that's going to happen. It's, you know, this is just a guide. It's not a massively in-depth. I genuinely think that a lot of the guys that are kind of at that level of massively in-depth, you know, this isn't aimed at you guys. It's more kind of aimed at people getting into this, starting to want to make the most out of their winter fishing, and seeing what is available, what works, and if there is anything that you would like us to kind of get a little more in-depth with, by all means drop in comments or drop us a message, say what you'd like to see, and I'm sure we can get that sorted out for you. But let's hope these rivers drop. I know the ponds are still fishing well, the canals are still fishing well. We'd love to see some pictures of some perch, chub and jack pike and whatnots from you guys. Let's keep them coming, and let's keep a what's it for a good winter. Thank you very much.